Hola, buenos días a todos, buenos días a todas. Bienvenidos de nuevo a este espacio, a esta inauguración del Simposio de Educación. Mi nombre es Jain Boboa, soy académico del Departamento de Psicología, Educación y Salud. Y bueno, pues estamos aquí para escuchar a Manish Jain. Él me dijo que lo presentara como alguien que viene de India, que está medio loco, que no dijera muchas cosas, que él se va a introducir, pero sí me gustaría compartir por lo menos tres apuntes para aquellos que no lo conozcan. Manish Jain es cofundador desde hace unos 9 años de XXIII, un instituto del pueblo para repensar la educación y el desarrollo. Cabe recordar que hay una viñeta en Mafalda donde Mafalda apunta a su padre y le pregunta, le dice, oye papá, ¿qué seguridad puedo tener yo que la educación que vaya a recibir no me va a arruinar el futuro? Pues bueno, no hay seguridad para que la educación que vayas a recibir vaya a arruinar tu futuro, te lo vaya a garantizar, pero sí hay intentos, hay modelos, hay esfuerzos para garantizar esa educación. Y de hecho, algunos modelos de educación impulsados desde planes nacionales del desarrollo o programas de las Naciones Unidas del Desarrollo, en los que Manish también ha participado, a veces más que soluciones generan problemas, generan despojo de saberes locales, y me parece que la experiencia de Manish Jain en este sentido es sumamente importante porque me parece que tenerlo hoy aquí con nosotras, con nosotros, contribuye a un montón de cosas que están pasando fuera, de conferences, barcamps, universidades populares, universidades libres, recuperación de saberes locales, implicación con la comunidad. En otras palabras, tanta cosa que ocurre ahí fuera y nosotros aquí dentro. Entonces, pues hoy nos convoca esta conferencia inaugural, y es con gusto que quisiera saludar, darle la bienvenida y dejar con ustedes a Manish Jain. Después de ello, después de su charla, habrá un turno de preguntas en la cual personas con el micrófono pasarán para asistirlos, y con gusto también empezaremos el diálogo. Entonces, sin más preámbulo, entiendo que ya ha habido muchas bienvenidas, muchas palabras. Estamos aquí para escuchar a Manish Jain. Entonces, pues, Manish Jain, namaste.
Namaste.
Gracias.
Namaste. It's a great honor for me to be here today with all of you. I was a little bit nervous when the curtains closed that everyone would have disappeared, so it's good to see that you're all still sitting in the audience. And before I start, I would like to make an apology to all of you for 3 things. So the first thing is that I cannot speak Spanish, so I have to communicate to you through English, or I can do in Hindi if you would like. The second thing is that I'm standing up here because all of my work in India is to break this divide between people, the people on the stage and the people in the audience. So I very deeply apologize for being up here. I would much rather be down there, and maybe I'll just come down and say hello also. Thank you. And the third thing I have to apologize for, and this is my daughter told me to make sure I apologize, is my bad Pepe jokes. You all know Pepe? Yes? So I think my jokes are worse. So in the presentation, please forgive me for the jokes as we go forward, yes? So before we start, I want to introduce you to 3 very key pedagogies that we use in India. So it's the pedagogies of neighboring, the pedagogies of play, and the pedagogies of laughter. So this is a very serious meeting, but you're all allowed to laugh in the next 1 hour also. So if I can ask you to just stand up, so we'll have an experiential introduction to these 3 pedagogies. And this is a little game called the Namaste game. So let me tell you all what Namaste means. We do like this. Namaste. And namaste means the divine energy in me bows to the divine energy in you. So, so what I would like to do is ask you to look at your neighbors all around you, front, back, left, right, and welcome them to this gathering with a very warm namaste. Okay, and now we're going to go a little bit more with some fun namastes. So the next namaste I want you to do is welcome your neighbor and give them a high-five namaste. Okay. And I think many of you came here to see some, you all know what Bollywood is? Bollywood, the Indian film industry. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, I'm not a Bollywood dancer, but I'm going to tell you a little Bollywood dance. Now, so we're going to do like this. Put your hands up in the air and do like this. And do a knee to knee. So touch the knee of the person in front of you and say namaste again. Okay, so one more round. So I want you to now, we have the, I think since we're in Mexico, I'll try another style. Can you come up here, one of you? Can I have a volunteer? Yes, I should have done this earlier. Okay, so the next namaste is going to be like this. Namaste. So do that to your neighbor, please. Namaste. Please don't hurt anybody. Don't break anything when you're doing that. Yeah, wait. And the last namaste, now that we know our neighbors, is we have in India the magic hug. It's called Jadoo Ki Jappi. So give a magic warm hug as big as you can to your neighbor. Okay. Yes, thank you. So I hope you like this little game. You can please sit down and we'll play more as we continue. Yes, thank you. So I have to say one thing, that I'm very nervous. This is my first time to be with an audience in Mexico, and where most of the audience knows Spanish, and I don't, so it's a little bit nervous for me. But let me start with a little bit of my journey. So just to give you, I think it's very important for each of us that we're all sitting here to share our journeys with each other. Because very important, if we want to go into the area of alternative education, is to actually know the stories where we all come from. So I thought I'll start with a little bit of my own story. So I was born in India, and my parents migrated to the United States when I was 3 years old. And I grew up in the United States. My father was an engineer and my mother was a doctor. And as I was growing up, I was, I think, very much a disappointment to them because I didn't want to be an engineer or a doctor. But as I was growing up, I went to a government school, public school in the United States. And a few things really touched me at that time. I was a bit of a, if you couldn't tell by now, I was a little bit of a troublemaker in school. I always found my school a bit boring in the classes. So what happened was that I used to be in the honors system, you know, like the honors classes. and then I would be making some trouble, and then I would be punished by the teacher, and she would say, you go to the other class where all the problem children are, the poor students. And I went there and I got to know them as people, and I was fascinated because this whole myth that I had been taught that there are some brilliant people, some average people, and some poor students was shattered. I started to see that these are like caring, sensitive, intelligent human beings. And I started to wonder, why do we have this system which is labeling children and putting them into these categories from a very early age, even as early as first grade, second grade, they start getting labeled and put in this category. So this troubled me a lot when I was growing up. The second thing that really troubled me was so I love to do all kinds of activities. So when I was like 8 years old, I started my first business. I used to be playing a lot of sports with my friends. I used to organize all kinds of events and many kinds. I was with the, writing for newspaper and all of these things. And I found it to be very rich and meaningful. But this was always called extracurricular. And I couldn't understand why this was extra, because I was learning so much in all of these other things, engaged with the community, engaged with real life problems, engaged with amazing kinds of people, inspiring people. And I was told, no, don't do any of that. You must study more. This is all extracurricular. So that also disturbed me a lot, because I was like, this is the place I really feel alive and learning, and in the classroom I feel very dull and oppressed. So that was the second thing. And the third thing that was very powerful is when I was growing up, we used to go back to India every 2 years, and we used to stay with my grandparents in our village. And there was a deep tension that I felt from early childhood between my father, who was the first person in his family to be educated. He was a PhD in engineering. And my grandmother, who never went to school and didn't know how to read and write. And this collision between two worlds I witnessed growing up all the time. And this sense of real deep shame from my father about his own mother, that she was uneducated, she couldn't speak English, so he never, when I was growing up, he never wanted to invite her. He was ashamed to invite her to the United States to meet his friends, to be in that community and things. So, and every time he would go to India, he knew that she didn't speak English, but he would always speak English, in front of her. So I grew up with this kind of real confusion about what is this, and trying to make sense of these two different worlds. So let me fast forward a little. I always had in my heart the desire, which I think all of us sitting here and everybody in the world actually has the desire to do something good in the world. So when I was thinking about what to do, I was asking all my friends, what should I do? And they said, if you want to really do something good in the world, you should make a lot of money. So I ended up on Wall Street as an investment banker. And I worked there for 2 years. And something happened. A few questions came when I was working there. The first was, I stopped believing in trickle-down theory. Do you know what trickle-down theory is? Trickle-down theory is this theory that let rich people become richer and richer and grow the economy more, and eventually the drops will trickle down, will filter down to the poor people. So this was the whole model of economics and finance was built on this idea that let the economy keep growing, and slowly the benefit will reach the poor people. So after 2 years, I realized that this was not happening. The rich were getting bigger and bigger, and the poor were getting poorer and poorer from this model. So I decided to leave. And the second thing that came to me was this very deep question, like many friends, I made many friends in that field, and they were all like amazing, really caring, good human beings. And I couldn't understand, as caring, thoughtful, good human beings, why they were continuing to work in this kind of profession, the global economy, globalization, the big corporate takeover of the planet, without thinking about questions of social justice or the environment. So why were really good people doing really bad things in the world? This was really perplexing for me. I couldn't understand this. So I left there, and then I asked my friends, what should I do now? Wanted to do something good. So they said, if you want to do something really good, you should become a professor, an intellectual, an academic. So I went, thought, where should I go? And I ended up at Harvard. And after 1 year of being at Harvard, I started again, many questions started coming to me and started troubling me. And I started feeling that there was this gap between what I noticed of knowing and actually being. So, do you understand that? Knowing versus being. So I understood my professors and all these academics, they knew a lot. But somehow in their daily life, their practice, their being, it didn't come out. So this disconnect between our head and our being. And I started wondering, how is this? Like all these brilliant people, and yet they're talking and talking the world, but they're not living it. So I said, this is not for me then. I need to find greater alignment and integrity between what I know or believe and want to learn and how I live. So I left there. So then people talked to my friends and everyone. I said, I want to do something good. What should I do now? So they said, go and work for the United Nations. So I ended up and I worked with UNICEF, with World Bank, with USAID, and with UNESCO. And when I was working there, again, many questions started coming to me. And the first question that came to me there was around the question of development. So the assumption was that Europe and America were developed, India, Mexico, Africa, many places were underdeveloped. And I started wondering, really, what do we mean by development? Who is really developed, or who is developing whom? Because one saw that so many problems were even in the so-called developed countries. So I thought this was a very important question to ask, and people in the United Nations didn't really want to engage with this question. The second thing is I was working on education in many different countries, in Africa, in former Soviet Union, in South Asia, in the Middle East. And I started questioning what I was doing. I thought that I had initially thought the education system was broken. And I was going to these different countries to try to fix it, to make it more better, more creativity, more empowerment, more critical thinking, more cooperation. And then I started feeling, when I started working, I said, maybe the education system is not broke. Maybe it's working very well for what it was designed to do. And by working very well, I started seeing in country after country, community after community, the education system was actually destroying people's innate creativities. It was destroying sense of community. It was destroying connection to land, to the natural world. And I started seeing that the design of the system was it was designed to actually do all of these things. So I said, oh my God, what am I doing? It's not my intention to go and destroy communities and destroy traditional knowledge systems and ways of being. So I resigned from UNESCO. The other thing I should say, I was working on a project there called Learning Without Frontiers. And so our work was to really look at what should be all the future models of education. And the assumption was that what we call factory schooling, factory model of education, was becoming obsolete, and that we would need to start to think of new models of education for the 21st century. So when I was there, our team was trying to raise this question, and there was a tremendous resistance within the UNESCO and the UN system to actually engage with this question. So I thought, this is very important that we start to think of new models, and there's a resistance. So I resigned from there, and I left. And I was there in a deep position of disillusionment, that the systems, all of the powerful systems in the world, they didn't really want to change. So, and then I asked my friends and talked to them, where should I go now? And nobody had anything to say, because I had been into all the centers of power on the planet, and I lost faith in those powers. I was in a very deep state of hopelessness. I lost faith in big governments to solve our problems. I lost faith in big technologies to solve our problems. I lost faith in academics to solve our problems. I lost faith in experts to solve our problems. So then I thought, what should I do now? So I decided to go back to India and be with my illiterate grandmother and try to understand a new way forward by living with her. And so that was the start of a journey 18 years ago. From that journey, we started, my wife and I, we started a movement called Shikshantar. And that movement, Shiksha, I can tell you, Shiksha means Shiksha means deep learning, and Antar means transformation. So we started this movement, and we call it a life movement, Jivan Andolan, which means life movement. So the idea was that the movement is not out there, the movement is in here. We are not experimenting on other people, we are the guinea pigs for our own experiments. So one of our experiments which started was that we decided we weren't going to send our children to school. So today I have a 14-year-old daughter. She's never been to school. She's a free learner. And so we started to create a whole set of opportunities together. And the second thing we thought we need to do, which I want to talk to you more about, is in order to make this vision, and I think my grandmother helped to facilitate this, was the most important thing we need to do today is unlearning. So I started on that process of unlearning, and I want to just pause here 1 second. And I think that if we want to really reimagine, rethink education, we have to be willing to enter into this process of unlearning. Yes? Everyone's with me? If you're with me, give me a little. We call this balle balle, huh? Yes? Okay. So let me share a little story about this unlearning with you. Can you put on that photo? Yes. Okay. So I would like to share a story that I adapted from the Nobel Prize-winning poet Rabindranath Tagore, in which he warned us of the dangers of what I call MEC education, like McDonald's education, for all. 75 years ago, he wrote this story. So in the parrot's training, we are told of a golden cage that is built to imprison the wild and uncivilized parrot so that she can be properly educated by the king's pundits and teachers. The king was keen that she learn the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. In addition, she should learn how to believe in and obey his authority. She should be proud of her newfound national identity. And she should know enough English to identify with all the latest global corporate brands and to work in a call center. In short, she should be trained to be an engine of economic growth. So he caught the parrot and he put her into the cage. First, tried stuffing the bird with pages of knowledge from the official government textbooks. Extra tutoring classes were also given. The restless parrot was prescribed Ritalin to combat her hyperactivity. That did not work. Then a UNICEF project came with all kinds of child-friendly and joyful teaching learning materials and training program for the teachers. A special Happy School leadership training was given to the principal. They also taught the girl child parrot about her child rights. That did not work. The parrot wanted to leave the cage, but was not allowed. The World Bank gave a loan to the king with austerity conditionalities, of course, to build a bigger cage with a nice toilet. CCTV, closed circuit captioned TVs, were also installed to ensure the discipline of the teachers and the parrot. Big Brother was smiling incessantly. That did not work. Then Harvard researchers were invited to conduct studies on the parrot's brain and multiple intelligences. Many research papers were written. The parrot was bombarded with every latest theory after theory. She slowly lost confidence in her gift of song. In a great display of public-private partnership, Coca-Cola Foundation helped to set up a special Happiness Coke vending machine in the cage. McDonald's decided to help out too by offering a midday Happy Meal for the parrot. The parrot just started to become obese and fat from all the empty calories, and she could no longer fly. Then the OECD came with the PISA standardized tests, and a new national policy white paper was written with much fanfare. The king and his ministers lined up to take lots of photographs celebrating their renewed commitment to educate poor, backward parrots. This was published in newspapers around the world, but still no improvement. Then technology gurus from Apple gave an iPad and free high-speed Wi-Fi connection to the parrot. She was made to watch videos from Khan Academy. You know Khan Academy? Of these videos? Yes. Soon, she even got her own Facebook account and made thousands of friends. Eventually, that only left her feeling more alone and depressed. The parrot was not allowed to leave the cage despite her obvious distress. In fact, she was scolded for being ungrateful and impertinent. Time and again, she was reprimanded and made to feel guilty. We have spent a lot of money for your education, and you do not even care. You are wasting your life. You will have no future. Sound familiar? She was given mindfulness training for 1 period a day to release all her built-up frustration and aggression. After all of these years of being locked up, the parrot was diagnosed with nature deficit disorder. Later, antidepressant drugs had to be prescribed as the parrot was caught cutting or slitting her wings. As the parrot was overstuffed with information and tormented by the pressure to achieve, she internalized her label as a slow learner and a failure. And she lost her ability to communicate with the wild and profound intelligence of nature. She slowly became totally dependent on the cage. One day, the cage was accidentally left open, but she was afraid to venture out. She had lost confidence in her natural capacities to learn without institutions. Her dreams were reduced to being a rat trapped in the rat race. A deep loss of purpose ensued. Slowly, her spirit withered away. In the end, a lot of people made a lot of money on the parrot's education. Everyone benefited except for the parrot. So, here we are, all in the cage. The funny thing is that it's an interesting thing, maybe a little ironic. 2 things today. One is that we're not able to see the cage. Very interesting thing. If we did a thought experiment, if we locked all the doors right now, what would be the first reaction of people? We would be getting up and banging on the door, saying, hey, open the doors, let us out, right? So it is our natural human instinct to be free, to be outside of the cage. And yet today, we are in a situation where we cannot even see the cage. And for those who can see the cage, we are very afraid to venture out of the cage. what will happen to us? Where will we go? So when I was thinking about unlearning, I thought unlearning is very important for us to actually start to do two things. One is to see the cage and to start to re-heal ourselves to come out of the cage and to understand that there is a much bigger world that exists outside of the cage. There are 5 things about the cage I would like to draw to your attention. I call it the 5 C's of the cage. And it's very important because one of the things that we talk a lot about, we all know that the planet is in a very deep crisis on many levels, socially, financially, environmentally, many different. So we started thinking that the tools that we are using, the processes, the instruments to get out of the crisis are actually part of the crisis. Let me say that again. The tools that we are using to get out of the crisis are part of the crisis. We keep doing more and more to try to fix the crisis, and we slip deeper and deeper into the crisis. And I would put forth in front of you the ideas because we are not seeing the cage. And there are 5 things in the cage as people working in education that I would like to point out, 5 elements. Because it's very important to start thinking whether we may be using the word alternative, but we may actually just be, in our efforts to fix the cage, we may be making things actually worse. So the first thing of the cage, first C, is compulsion. Forcing people. I hope nobody is being forced to sit here and listen to me. That would be the worst torture. Compulsion, forcing people against their will. And the peak of this in India, I can say the humiliation of this compulsion is that we have been reduced to having to raise our hands and ask for permission to go to the toilet. This is the worst humiliation. That is something that's so natural, we have to ask an institutional authority to actually go to the toilet. So this idea of compulsion, and I can go deeper as we unfold. The second C is competition. Forcing people to compete against each other. Asking people to say that your winning, my winning depends on, putting them in a situation where my winning depends on your losing. There can be only one person at the top. So creating a situation of scarcity where people have to compete against each other to get ahead. The third C is commodification. This is the last maybe 150 years, the first time in history where learning has become a commodity, something to be bought and sold. And the idea of learning, the kind of education, we are also teaching people that life is a commodity. Knowledge is a commodity. The air is a commodity. Water is a commodity. Land is a commodity. The fourth C is monoculture. Monoculture, standardization. One standard everyone has to achieve, one way of learning. one system of grading. And the fifth C is compartmentalization, fragmentation of knowledge, fragmentation of intergenerational, fragmentation of generations. Kids are separate, youth are separate, adults are separate, old people are separate. So fragmentation on that level, and fragmentation, biology is separate than sociology. These are all separate subjects. So for us, we believe that knowing is holistic, not fragmented. But the cage keeps fragmenting us, hyper-specializing, to the level the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So these are the 5 C's. And this is what we call the hidden curriculum. This is the curriculum. This is the structure of the system that we have that creates a different value system. Many of us have probably heard of value education. So everyone is assuming there's no values in education, and we need to add value education on top of it. But actually, these 5 C's have their own value system they create, which is geared around authority, obedience, control, greed, conformity, individualism. So, we need to unlearn this. We need to open ourselves up to unlearning. So I would want to pause here for 2 minutes and ask you to look at your neighbor. And for the next 3 days while we're together, talk about one thing you feel we need to unlearn in order to go more deeper into a conversation around reimagining and rethinking education, in order to go into a deeper conversation of how do we actually come out of the cage. So please talk to your neighbor for 2 minutes and try to share one thing that it's very important today you feel to unlearn if we have to get deeper into this conversation together. Okay? So 2 minutes. Huh?
Quiero compartir todos. Ya no tenemos tiempo.
En
En los 2 minutos.
English.
Todo es English.
No English? Oh, pardon. Okay. It's great to see everyone still awake. So, I would like to humbly offer to you, let me say something a little bit about unlearning first. Unlearning, an agenda of unlearning, it's really important for 2 reasons. So the first reason is when we say unlearning, it's a recognition, a profound recognition that there has been a very deep conditioning process that we have gone through. We are conditioned beings. And the conditioning, in the case of the parrot, is for a large amount due to the cage. And so it's a conscious recognition that we need to undertake an agenda of deconditioning ourselves. Otherwise, we will just keep adding things onto the cage. And at worst, they won't work. And at best, they won't work. At worst, they'll make the cage bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful. The second thing of unlearning is that it takes us into the space of the unknown. School has conditioned us to be very comfortable with the known. We are not comfortable going into the unknown. And so the process of unlearning is very important to start to open up the sphere of the unknown, the world, the magic, the mystery, the chaos, the connections that all lie in the unknown. So let me very humbly offer you 3 things that I found very important. I learned from my grandmother around unlearning, what we need to unlearn today. So the first thing that we need to unlearn is that we are not capable. We've been taught that we are not capable. We are not intelligent enough. We are not beautiful enough. We are not smart enough. We need experts. We need PhDs. We need people from outside to come and externally teach us and validate us. The second thing I think is very important to unlearn is the idea that we are alone. Nobody is there to help us. Nobody is there to care for us. And there's a deeper level of this of being alone, that we think that we are the only beings on the planet who are intelligent. We've forgotten that life outside is intelligent and that we are connected to it all the time. The separation from a nature. So the second thing we have to unlearn is the idea that we are alone. And the third thing I think is important, which I learned from my grandmother, we are taught that we do not have enough. We are a poor country, a poor community. There's scarcity all the time. This mentality of artificial scarcity, where we keep thinking, oh, if we had a bit more money, if we had a bit more of that, then we could do something. So I would invite you in the space from scarcity to the space of abundance, that we have enough. We have enough in between us. education has been a very important tool to create a mentality of scarcity in us all the time. And so if we want to create alternatives, it has to be built on the idea that we have enough. Otherwise, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough technology, we don't have enough this, we don't have enough that, right? But if we flip it and start with the idea we have enough, we have what we need to start creating new models, new visions. So, in the spirit of this, I would like to share with you something that we have been sharing around India. To go a bit deeper into this, it's called, do we have, I think we had copies made. Do you have the photocopies? Do you have them? Oh, okay, good. So let me just briefly read this with you. It's called the Declaration of Decolonizing Education. And this is kind of the starting point for us, for our movement, in terms of how do we start to reimagine education. So let me briefly read this. I can no longer accept a narrative of education which teaches me that my village grandmother was illiterate, primitive, backward, stupid, uneducated, underdeveloped, uncivilized, and not capable of managing her own affairs. I can no longer accept a narrative of education which standardizes, sorts, brands, and condemns millions of beautiful, brilliant, talented children around the world as failures, problem students, and slow learners, and uses certification as a tool for denying people access to future learning opportunities and working opportunities and dignity. I can no longer accept a narrative of education that teaches us that the head is more important than the heart, the hands, and the home. I can no longer accept a narrative of education that sees my links to my land, to my local languages, to my seeds, to my rivers, to my trees, to my histories and her stories, to my body, to my inner voice, to the spirit world, to my community, all as a barrier to modernization and development, which must at best be destroyed if we are to progress, and at worst be condemned to being celebrated as a multicultural day festival in school. I can no longer accept a narrative of education that teaches me that physical work in my fields, in my home, and in my community is drudgery. And my children's definition of happiness and the good life, bon vivre, lies in drinking Coca-Cola, eating at McDonald's, and chatting on Facebook. I can no longer accept a narrative education that teaches me that I have to survive, to compete against others in my community and against peoples from other countries in order to survive. I can no longer accept a narrative which teaches me that learning is a commodity, along with the air, water, land, food, and that knowledge is the property of individuals through copyrights and patents. I can no longer accept a narrative of education that teaches me that we are poor in education because we don't have schools, trained teachers, or scientific knowledge. So we need more foreign direct investment. We need more foreign aid. We need more public-private partnerships. We need more free trade agreements. And we need to always trust the experts over the wisdom of our communities. I can no longer accept a narrative of education that gives power to the ministry, we call it in India, the Ministry of Human Resource Development. To the Ministry of Human Resource Development to define what it means to be human. So this is the Declaration of Decolonizing Education that we created in XXIII. I hope the Spanish is clear to you. So this became, this is a framework which has guided and inspired our movement. Much of this framework, I should say, is not new. It was, if we go into recent history, Gandhi. You all know Gandhi? Heard of that guy? Yes? Okay. So, Gandhi wrote a very famous book, which you probably have not heard of. His most radical and famous book, I have a copy here I can show you, called Hind Swaraj. And Swaraj meant, literally it means rule over the self. Swa means self, and Swaraj means rule over the self, self-awareness. I like to say in a more poetic way, it's harmony between the self. Gandhi was calling for, trying to clarify the purpose of the freedom struggle. He said the freedom struggle is not to get rid of the British. The real purpose of the freedom struggle is to expand our sense of self beyond the narrow individual self. So there's a sense of, there's a self within ourself, there's a self, the community self, and there's the larger self that is connected and part of nature and the universe. So expanding real freedom will come when we can expand ourselves, a sense of self, and create harmony between these different selves. So this was the purpose of the freedom struggle, which was, then Gandhi came up with this idea that he understood that the modern education system was narrowing our sense of self, reducing it to the individual consumer, the individual voter, the individual citizen. So we are now trying to see that the idea of education is this expansion of the sense of self. And Gandhi talked about four things which were important for doing that. So the first was the idea, his vision around expanding the sense of self was around self-sufficiency. Let me share you a dream. A dream is, I would like to live a life where I am not exploited by anybody else and where I do not exploit anyone. This is what the dream that Gandhi was offering us with Swaraj. Can we create a world where we do not exploit anyone else and nobody is exploiting us? Where our bodily labor has value and is a tool for liberation. The second thing that Gandhi talked about was an awareness of our inner self, of our inner world, of our thoughts, our feelings, emotions, desires. That real education, what he called Nay Talim, new education, should help to create this awareness of our inner world so that we are not slaves to this, but we have a very keen self-mastery. The third thing that Gandhi talked about was the idea that the self, that we reconnect, we heal the separation between the self where we think we are separate from nature. And we understand that the self is deeply integrated and a part of life on this planet. We are not separate from nature. And the fourth aspect of his Netalim was that we should reclaim the tools for our own learning, that we no longer are dependent on institutions to feed us in the cage. So with this in mind, we started many different projects. I want to share with you some of the experiments we've been doing in India. I forgot to say that I'm not an academic. You should have said that. I'm a very practical person. If you come to India, you can see many beautiful practical experiments that are happening, which I'm part of there. So what I'm going to tell you is all practical, please. So we created, let me just give you a little bit of an overview. So we started this movement 18 years ago, very much inspired by Gandhi and Tagore and other freedom fighters in India. And one of the things that we have created is what we call Swaraj University. So Swaraj University is the first self-designed university in India. And by self-design, I mean that we call the learners, we have a word for the learners, which is called Kojis. So the idea that Koji means seeker, one who seeks. And the idea is that we are all born with a seed, a search, a deeper magical purpose, why we've come to this earth. And the purpose of education then needs to help us to understand that search, that purpose. So that is the whole, you could say, the whole program is built around understanding the self and our purpose, deeper purpose. Why have each of us come here? It's no coincidence that we are all sitting in this room together. So in Swaraj University, it's a 2-year program. It's an initiation into reclaiming control over our learning. And there's 2 things we are particularly looking at in Swaraj. One is unlearning, and the other is what we call gift culture. And the core of gift culture starts with reconnecting to the spirit of deep gratitude for life. To connect to the spirit of trust. You know, many of us hear all the time now through the media, through education, through our parents, don't trust your neighbors. You can't trust anybody. Right? So this is a whole spirit, the gift culture, is to reclaim the spirit of trust, of care, of sharing, of forgiveness, of hospitality. So these are the 2 of compassion. Unlearning and gift culture are the core pillars of what Swaraj University is set up to do. So let me share with you a couple of interesting aspects of it. So one thing for unlearning, we do lots of experiments around unlearning. So one is called the bicycle yatra. Yatra means pilgrimage. Inner journey and outer journey. So what we do is we take the people, and I said the experiment, I've actually gone through this myself. So everything, I'm the biggest guinea pig. Everyone comes and tries all their crazy experiments on me. first. And I'm still surviving, you can see. So we take young people with us for 1 week, no money in our pockets, no gadgets, no technology, no iPhones, no iPads, no cameras, nothing. No medicine. No food. And this is the scariest for most people. No plans, no agenda. And this is a journey of helping people reconnect, come out of the cage and reconnect to the spirit of unlearning and gift culture. And we go and travel and we live with communities for a week, staying in their houses, working with us. And this was very important for me because when I used to work with UN and many international NGOs, we would go into the communities in a nice big American car bought by USAID and drive in and start to talk to people. And there was already a predetermined list of problems. The community used to tell, oh, we have this problem, we have this problem. It even was like some people would come over to me and say, just tell us what project you're bringing and we'll tell you the problems in advance of what you need to know. And this was very different from the kind of things I had seen as growing up in my village with my grandmother and with many other relatives and people in our community, that people didn't talk that way about themselves and their problems. They weren't putting themselves in this framework of victimhood. So when we went to the cycle yatra, the idea was we understood we were very conditioned to tell people, other people, what they should do, how they should live their lives, because we have all been educated, so we give a lot of free advice to everybody. So when you don't have food and when you don't have money, you're and you don't have a plan, the idea was, can we strip everything to putting ourselves to be vulnerable, where we shift the power. There's structural power that shifted from us when we drive in our car, we are coming from the city, to when we are bicycling and we don't have anything. We're very vulnerable. And we saw that those conversations, when we put ourselves in a space of vulnerability with communities, lots of new things start to come. We start to see, again, the real power that lies in the community. We start to overcome the ideas that we are alone, we don't have enough, we're not capable. So the cycle yatra is one very interesting experiment that we do. Another thing I would like to tell you that we do not have any degrees or diplomas, because we think that degrees and diplomas create a new caste system, a new hierarchy. Because all of the time, only the people who have degrees and diplomas are thought to have knowledge. And my grandmother doesn't exist according to the world of degrees and diplomas. Indigenous communities do not exist, their knowledge, because of degrees, in the world of degrees and diplomas. So we started a campaign called Healing Ourselves from the Diploma Disease. So the idea is we started talking to many organizations, companies, movements, and we asked them, can you remove the requirement for a degree or diploma from your hiring or promotion strategies? So we have more than 500 organizations which have agreed to remove any requirement for degrees and diplomas. So we are trying to, and our dream is this will be thousands thousands and thousands of organizations. And you can imagine, if you had a choice, possibility, that you could learn experientially, do the things that you are passionate about, and earn your living, and you didn't need a degree or diploma to do that, how many people would be staying in schools? In India, it would be very little. Very little. So the idea of this is to expand this, that more and more organizations. It's very interesting. You know Random House Publishing? Random House? Big, big American publishing house. Recently, they announced that they are removing the criteria for degrees and diplomas from their hiring. You don't need a diploma or a degree to work in Random House today. Isn't that great? You can clap for them. How are we doing on time? Yes. So we should wrap up soon? So let me just tell you, I want to have more time so we can have some question and answer. But hopefully I've said enough stuff to get you all excited. Not that excited that you want to kill me, but enough. The other thing that, 2 other projects that we are working on, we have a movement, we call it the walkouts movement. Walkout. So we're actively encouraging people to walk out of the education system. So we have thousands of families who have removed their children from school and are reclaiming control of their own learning, rebuilding learning in their own communities for themselves and their children. The interesting thing around walkout is I don't know if it's going to become so clear in Spanish, but in English there's the word dropout, which is a very humiliating term for many people. You see young people in India, they say, oh, I dropped out of school at class 10 or class 12 or class 8. So as soon as they hear this word walkout, they get super excited. You can just see a change in their body language. Because they say, oh, I'm not a dropout. I'm a walkout. I'm reclaiming control of my own learning. And the last thing I'll just share with you, we created a movement, vision for the idea of what we call learning cities. So Udaipur is a learning city, that we cannot think of learning happening only in one space, like a shopping mall. Learning is not like a shopping mall. So we need to have many, many spaces, a larger learning ecosystem. And so, which has a whole variety of knowledge systems and people who are having mentors. And we have a whole range of spaces, places that people are going and creating things, knowledge together. So the whole city can become a vibrant thing. So the idea is to shift from looking at one space, one institution as the center of learning, to thinking of a larger ecosystem. So I think I will just end up there. There's lots more I can still share with you about things that are happening, but hopefully this can start a conversation between us. And I would just like to end with one thing, which is there's a very important, I said, gift culture. We're doing a lot of experiments with gift culture. And the core of the gift culture starts with retouching into a sense of gratitude. So I would just like to ask you to, and it's very interesting, there was some study somebody had done, 2 groups, similar backgrounds. One group was asked every day to journal about what they're grateful for in their lives, what's beautiful in their lives. The other group was asked to journal about what are the problems they have. in their lives. And at the end of the 2 months period of this, they found that the group who was journaling about what they are grateful for had a much greater sense of self-esteem, dignity, happiness, and was more likely to engage in positive ways in their community. So I would just like to open this whole beautiful gathering by asking you to share one more thing with your partner, next to your neighbor, something that you are very deeply grateful for in your life. And let us start with this spirit of gratitude will radically shift. My experiences of gratitude will radically shift our perception and open up lots of new possibilities of abundance around us. So I invite you to just take 1 minute and share something that's very deeply that touches you and you're grateful for today in this moment in your life. Thank you so much.